I got some water there for you.
Well, I learned from a friend that showed me why. Instead of asking why, start asking why not. Time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're lying in the sun. Bit by bit, the older that we get, the faster it tick, 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 ticks. Time flies. Whoa, whoa, time flies.
Good afternoon. Lyndall here again with Marshfield Old School Times. Thanks for joining us today. Beautiful summer afternoon, July the 20th, 1969. Where were you? Because that's when we landed on the moon. You guys don't remember that, but I do. But it is a historic day in the history of our nation. Thanks for joining us today. Logan Fraker, our producer's with us, and I always want to thank Dennis Beck for the theme song that we start the show with. Want to start out first of all asking for prayers for the accident that occurred last night out on the Spur Drive, and we're not going to get into that much or anything, but I did want to ask the mayor to make a comment about that, and certainly we want to keep all those families in our prayers. Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Fraker. Yes, we do ask that you keep all those involved, all those who were bystanders as well, and all our emergency crews who worked the scene as well in your thoughts and prayers. Our officer has been discharged from the hospital, and we're just sending positive vibes and prayers to all those impacted.
Thank you very much, and I guess I should have introduced you before I did that. Welcome,
right.
Mayor Natalie McNish
Thank
to
you.
our show today, and City Administrator Sam Rost.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. Thought it would be good to kind of get an update on sort of a state of the city on our show. Let us know what all's going on. But before we do that, we always like to kind of start our show with a little bit of history about the people involved, the guests. And it's really interesting to see where we came from, and as Gary Price would say, when you came to America.
Okay.
And then a little bit about your families and your kids and even your folks and siblings or whatever. So, Mayor, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and when you began this journey on this planet?
Absolutely. So I was born in Chillicothe, Missouri. That's where both of my parents grew up and went to high school. And we came down here in 1982 when my father received a job at Don Wessel. It was Oldsmobile at the time, later became Honda and everything else. And so he and ended up several of his brothers ended up following down here, kind of one at a time. All of them were great with a wrench, and great people as well.
Sure.
They were great with business.
And your maiden name was?
Pulliam.
Pulliam.
Yep, my
Okay.
maiden name is Pulliam.
Okay.
And so we came down here in 82. Lived in Springfield primarily until I was in about the 3rd grade. We moved to Nixa, and I graduated from Nixa High School. So
Did you bring some sliced bread with you from Chillicothe?
I did not, but they always remind me that it's the home of sliced bread. Always, always.
Right.
We still have family back there and still visit from time to time.
Sure.
But yeah, I graduated from Nixa High School, and shortly after that, I actually met my husband, Stephen McNish, at the dealership that my dad still worked at that point. Yeah, we met on my 15th birthday, started dating when I was 18, and we were married when I was 20. So he was born and raised in Fordland. He's been a Webster County, Missouri person all his life. And that was really my first interaction with Webster County and getting to know its people. Most of the time when I grew up, I would spend my school year in Nixa, and then I would go stay with my grandparents for the majority of the summers. They lived in the northwestern corner or northeastern corner of Kansas. And so a little bitty town, it's called Fairview, Kansas. It's at the intersection of 36 and 75 coming out of Topeka. The population sign says there's 250 people that lived there, but I'm pretty sure they counted stray cats, dogs, and maybe cows to get to that. But it was a really, really small town, and it was a really tight-knit community. So my grandparents were really involved, and when I stayed with them, I got the pleasure of being really involved too. So my grandma waitressed the cafe. My grandpa was a cook. They kind of managed that operation. It was open for breakfast and lunch only. And then after we shut down the cafe, my grandma would go help put out the weekly paper. And my grandpa was the mayor, and he would go over to the city offices. And then we'd meet back for dinner, and they were in the church choir, and they were constantly taking dishes to neighbors or loved ones that needed a helping hand or whatever it was. That's just the community that I kind of called home.
Sounds like Mayberry.
It was a lot like
Really?
Mayberry. It really was. Though I'm not sure Barney even got the one bullet. To be honest with you. But nonetheless, that was, I had both experiences. So
experienced that culture for sure.
I did. And Nixa wasn't the Nixa it is today when I lived there either. It was a smaller community and a tight-knit community. And I've always really enjoyed having that type of relationship with my neighbors. So when we came to Webster County, it really kind of felt like going back to Kansas in many ways. They had that same tight-knit community in Fordland. We later moved to Rogersville. And then that's when I kind of became more involved in government work. So I've always had an interest in helping businesses achieve their goals. Never really wanted to be the person that had the business to make it happen. I just always wanted to be the helper, kind of behind the scene. And so that's kind of where that took hold. I started with the state when I was 18.
Oh, you did?
I did. Started with the Department of Revenue as a tax preparer for low-income families. And so I did that for a while I was a freshman in college. Through that, I was offered a full-time position. And so I went to working full-time for the state and taking night classes for a while. Until I could finish my degree.
You're kind of a numbers person.
I am. And then that kind of built a little bit, and I slowly worked my way through the state. Ended up at the state auditor's office, and that's where I really kind of fell in love with it.
And you got your degree at MSU, right?
No, actually, I got it from Columbia.
Columbia, okay. Well, I knew that you worked later on at MSU. So,
I work there now.
We'll hear more about that. We're going to flip over and let Sam talk about his childhood just a little bit.
Yeah, so mine's kind of completely different than Natalie's. I'm a Webster County native and a Marshfield native. This is all I know. Right? I've been here all my life, and so very deep roots that connect with lots of different people and lots of different families, and so truly just been blessed with just a wonderful group of individuals and family that have supported me all my life. You know, my youth consisted of just running around playing baseball and sports and occasional vacations and short trips to Kansas City and St. Louis to catch some ball games. You know, I've got a sister, Misty. She works over at the schools, and so she's been involved with the school system for several years. And then, you know, fast forward to junior high, and I started dating my now wife in junior high. And so, you know, we started dating when we were 14 or 15, something like that. And so got
just
married.
Almost illegal today.
Yeah, just almost, you know. So I joke all the time.
Friends,
they're really good friends, yeah. And so I joke all the time, you know, that we dated 9 years before we got married. And so I tell everybody, I said we really wanted to make sure, you know,
That's
I wanted to make sure that she was the right one.
Yeah.
But
and your folks, you didn't mention Wayne and Debbie. Of course, Wayne retired from Webster Electric.
Yep. So my dad was at Webster Electric for almost 40 years, you know, and my mom, she used to work at the bank and a couple different here and there, but I mean, she stayed at home with me and my sister, and you know, she was my Sunday school teacher until I was old enough to remember and got kind of go into adult classes. So,
and she was a Hartville native, right?
She was a Hartville native.
Hart Peterson.
Yep, she
Peterson.
was.
That's a pretty prominent name down in
the baby of 8,
in
right?
Wright County.
The baby of 8,
right?
And so big family. And
turn around there and grab that plate behind you, Sam.
Yeah,
we're going to show that here real quick. So so this plate is it's an aluminum sign plate that says built by Rost Lumber Company, Marshfield, Missouri. And Sam's great-grandfather, my grandfather, was Cale Rost. And then his grandfather, Don Rost, had Rost Lumber Company back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And they built hundreds of pickup racks.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And of course, I know I spent a little time out there as a kid on Saturdays, and I'm sure I know Sam did as well.
Yep.
Hanging out and learning how to build and learning a lot of things about life, quite frankly. But those plates were attached to those pickup racks and those truck bed racks and so forth. And like I said, there's hundreds, if not 1,000 or two of them out there in the country, or was at the time. But that heritage that we all are proud of, Sam and I especially, with Cale and Josie Rost and that family, has been unprecedented in forming us as human beings, and that's something that you just can't. You can't put a price on it.
Sure.
But I wanted to share that because I've had that plate hanging up back there, and it never been really talked about it. But,
sure. So I mean that's one thing that I've been proud of, is my heritage on both sides.
Right.
So obviously my great grandpa and my grandpa are both Webster County guys, and I'm sure you may even get into it. But we were talking before. Uh, my great grandpa Cale was an alderman for a little while before he went on to be presiding commissioner. Then my grandpa Donald went on to be presiding commissioner. But if you flip the coin a little bit, then my grandpa on my mom's side, so Roy actually started in California, and not very many people know this, but he was a hobo. He hopped trains.
Really?
And he got off the trains in Hartville, right?
Really?
Wow.
Little bit different story, right?
It is. Yeah.
So pretty cool to hear
that was
stories.
her grandfather, your mom's grandfather.
That was my mom's dad.
Your mom's dad.
That was my mom's dad.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah.
He raised 8 great kids.
He
They all
did.
very successful, and
Yep.
I think I know most all of them.
Yeah.
Wow,
No,
that's cool.
No, just
Did he
great
did he meet your grandmother here then?
in Hartville?
Yeah,
in Hartville.
She must have been a pretty solid gal.
Yes, I would say so. I would say so.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, good
Cool.
times.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Natalie, go ahead and talk about your kids and your family a little bit more then.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
That's my favorite subject.
I know it is. Yeah.
So I've been married to my husband, Stephen, for 23 years now. We have 2 amazing teenage boys, David and Avery McNish. One is going to be a freshman this year, and that's been a bit of a culture shock for me coming into high school. The other will be in the 8th grade. They are incredibly active in everything. I think we are now in 6 sports, plus band, choir,
Wow.
and act. We really love 4-H as well. So, so yeah, they keep me busy.
You bet. Now are your folks still around alive?
My dad is passed, but my mom moved here to Marshfield with us.
Okay. Good.
My mom is Diana Emery, and she is a creator of more than anything, and a great nurturer. I've learned so much from her. When I was growing up, she was single mom, and she was Superwoman is really the only way to describe it. She was Superwoman. There wasn't anything that came across our plate that she couldn't conquer.
Yeah.
And so just a great environment to grow up in, and
That's awesome.
I had some stepbrothers and stepsisters as well, and all great influences.
And your brothers and sisters, are they around in the area?
Some are. I think so my stepbrothers and stepsisters are kind of sprinkled across Missouri, with one in Chicago.
Okay.
I think he's the farthest away.
Sam, talk a little bit about your kids and Brianne.
Yeah, so as I said, Bree and I have been married 20 years this year, right? And so we've got 2 kids, Kobe and Natalie. Kobe just turned 16 this year, so that's kind of a new one for us. I've always struggled with every season of life changing with those kids, and just saying, hey, this is my favorite stage, this is my favorite age. I don't want them to grow out of this one. I was ready for him to turn 16. Between all the baseball practices and football, and
you really do.
It's pretty handy. Hey, we've got a Walmart pickup, so please go.
Yeah. Now your wife may not feel that way, but I think it's
she
a damn
likes
thing.
it. I think that she does like it. Natalie, she's 14. She's gonna be a freshman. And so 2 in high school. Didn't think I'd ever be there. It's kind of crazy, but time just absolutely flies. Most of our time in the summertime is spent chasing Kobe around playing baseball. Atlee has been just a dominant athlete. Really, in the past, she's done competitive gymnastics and volleyball, and so we spend most of our time in our what you would call vacation time. In gymnasiums or on baseball fields. So just chasing them all over the countryside, doing it, and love it. Love every minute of it, and it'll be gone.
You were a good ball player. You played baseball too.
I was mediocre at best. I really liked it. I think I was. I don't think I was near as good as what I thought I was. But looking back at it now, it was fun.
Right.
But I've had the privilege of coaching Kobe's team, and me and a guy in Springfield have been able to come alongside those boys, and it's fun just to watch them grow. We started that when they were 7 or 8 years old. And it's just been so much fun to watch those boys change, and you just don't know when they're that age what they're going to turn into. And it's been
Those
great.
bonds that you're creating with those kids too, back 50 years ago, the bonds were, you take your grandsons fishing or your sons fishing or whatever, you do things on the farm together. But that's all changed. It's different. But what you and Brianna have done with your kids, those are the bonds that are so important.
Yeah.
And again, it could be, doing band or whatever it is, but being involved in those activities with those children is extremely important.
Well, and they know mom and dad are going to be there, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that's something that my mom and dad bestowed upon me. I mean, I can't look back and see any baseball games in my mind where my mom and dad weren't there.
That's right.
I don't know how they did it, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we didn't do travel stuff like we do now, but it wasn't the thing that it is now.
Right.
But I mean, they were there. My dad coached my baseball team when I was little, and he didn't know anything about it, right?
Yep.
I mean, looking back now, he didn't have the knowledge, or he didn't play, and so when it came around for me to do it, it was just really cool opportunity.
You bet.
So I just love it.
Sure.
Love it.
And so this is going to be a great segue to move into some city of Marshfield stuff. And what we'll do, because of both of you talking about your kids and the sports and activities, we'll talk a little bit about the parks departments and how far you all have came with that, even since you've been the mayor, Natalie, and certainly in the last 5-10 years. I've seen, well, probably since you built your new pool, honestly.
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot of activity with programs. When I was a kid, Sam, when you were a kid, even, you probably still had Mad Club baseball summer leagues, which weren't really city sponsored. They were independent, because there was a bunch of gentlemen and women in the 60s that decided they wanted to have these programs for their kids, and they just got together and did it.
Yeah.
Had meetings right here at this campus, and it wasn't necessarily city affiliated at all, except they played down at the old park, down at the fairgrounds ball field and stuff. But I think, as time has evolved and we're where we are today, the city has been had the foresight to realize that people need those activities, and you just can't depend on volunteers anymore. So you've kind of taken that with the Parks Department. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and where you've came from and where you're heading with all that? Because I know they're doing some incredible stuff that people that don't have kids in it may not realize.
They really are. A lot of that has to do with the great team that we started with. So having Mark Baker and Diana Schumann and everybody else that makes up that team, because there are so many part-time employees that float that battleship. But having that great team, and then they've kind of led the charge. But long ago, it started out as a really grassroots movement of the citizens of Marshfield saying, hey, we want more. We want more. We want it structured. And we're willing to help do it, right? And so you start with that, and that's when I came along on the Parks Committee. Really was my first touch it was my first touch here with Marshfield, and well, maybe my second. But really seeing that whole pool project take shape. And while it wasn't exactly what the citizens wanted, it wasn't the big dream. It was that combination of the responsible stewardship of funds and providing an asset that was going to be well taken care of, and then having that team that can look at that and constantly reprogram it and figure out how to make all the schedules work and find those great team players that come along and put the life into it. And that's the secret ingredient. It's finding those people that put the life into it.
And it seems like you've had a unit that stuck together too.
We do.
When you look at even your position, Sam, before you became city administrator, we had kind of a revolving door with city administrators. It was like a stepping stone to get to a bigger job.
Sure.
And quite frankly, the citizens, they kind of had enough of that. They were frustrated with that. Let's get somebody in here that knows the town, the community, hire them, and they want to be here and live here. And that's what you've done with Sam, and it's paid off.
Absolutely.
A lot of times you have that same kind of turnover in a parks department, or, because these people maybe come in here, they're not natives or whatever, and they've got education, they know what to do, but they go on and move up to a bigger town. But you've been able to keep that same nucleus of people here now for 5-6 years, maybe.
Oh yeah, it's been really good.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you're only as good as the people around you,
That's
right?
right.
And so that goes across all of our employees, every department. But I will say that I go back to when I started our for the city, our summers consisted of, or at least our springs consisted of getting that old pool ready.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was just a nightmare. You'd been there, you'd seen it, and so when we finally had to close it down, there was a span there where we had to go a while without a pool.
Yeah, that wasn't popular.
No, it wasn't popular, right? But just we were getting to the point where we were spending over $100,000 a year just to open the gates.
Yeah, that's
right. And so
ridiculous.
losing money, left and right, and so losing a big piece of quality of life. Well, you fast forward, and the community came together and said, "This is what we want." And so we were able to start putting together a team, and so we put the pool in, and it's thriving right now. But then what Mark and his team have been able to do is open up what is a true parks department, right? And so not anything against former employees of the past, it's just different times and different ways. And so what they really did was took a 3 or 4 month programmable season, and this stretches across 12 months now.
Yeah.
And so it's really fun. And so what you don't see, and I think that all of my employees would say this, but I don't think you'll see any micromanaging, right? So you give them the ownership, and so Mark and his team take full ownership of that. So when they do that, I mean, you see that starting to come alive. And hey, what if we did this? And now we're doing Nerf gun wars, and we're doing paint stuff, and we're doing all these different classes that we've just never done it. Yeah, the disc golf, that's been a huge thing. That was, I can remember when we started talking about it, I had certain individuals in the community reach out and call me multiple times and say, "This is the biggest waste of money we've ever done. Whatever I get, you're going to do it, but I do not agree with it." And fast forward after we get it done, and you see all these people come in and come out every day. I've had 2 or 3 of them call me back and go, "I was wrong."
Now, I don't always agree with everything the city or the county does, or the state, or the national government. But I will tell you this, on the disc golf, I knew it would work, and I'm going to tell you why. You guys may or may not know this. I think maybe Sam, I might have mentioned to you. So my wife's nephew's name was Jared Hilton. Jared was a Lebanon native, fine young man, grew up, probably would have graduated 2000, somewhere around there. About your age, I guess, actually. Well, he was stricken with a brain tumor and passed away at 17 or 18 years old. But before he got sick, he became a very big disc golf player.
Okay.
And we were talking about the bonds with our parents. He and his dad, which is Melanie's uncle, Brad Hilton in Lebanon, they did it together. And the one thing that Brad and the Lebanon community did after he passed, and it was a major traumatic experience for the community. He was, I think, a senior in high school or whatever. They began the disc golf program in Lebanon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Out at Ashley Park out north, and you may have seen it. And I think they have a tournament every year. It's the Jared Hilton tournament. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I know I talked to Mark Baker, your parks director, whenever they started the Marshfield program. We talked about Jared and that tournament and what Lebanon had done, and they had collaborated some on getting going here in Marshfield. So I'm just throwing that out there because I knew it would work, because I knew the popularity that it was down there. And again, it's something that mom and son or daughter and dad can do together.
Sure.
And it doesn't take a lot of skill like golf really does.
Oh, sure.
And so,
and it's not an impact, and that's kind of the vision that the Parks Department has had. Is we're not focusing just on kids sports. We want to provide opportunities for all generations and all citizens of Marshfield.
Yeah.
And so,
a lot of what makes that such a success is the partnerships that we've made. Right. I mean, so I can say that it hasn't always been that way. Not every city's like this, but our partnerships with the county, with the schools, with our civic groups. I mean, it's I would compare it second to none.
The chamber.
Right? The chamber. I mean, everybody. The Lions Club comes on board. Everybody that we reach out to, we're continually trying to figure out how to partner, and it's been nothing.
That's how it was in the old days.
That is right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You guys lease our gym and utilize it several months out of the year, and we appreciate it. Number one, we need to keep it busy in order to keep the bills paid, and you also have been great partners there, and hope to continue to do that.
Which is probably a good point to talk about where we're going with the parks. And so whenever we went back through our vision casting and our previous board even and then this board, we started talking about, we said what does the community want? Well, the number one thing that everybody came back and wanted was an indoor pool. The number one thing that we couldn't afford to operate was an indoor pool. So we've got a wonderful facility out there now. But the second thing they wanted was an activity center.
Sure.
And so we've been working diligently through the process, and so we kind of have a design, a schematic design, so we don't have everything laid out, don't have building plans or anything, but we've looked and allocated what space we need, right? And said, here's what we're going to be able to do, and here's where we're going to head. And so, we're working with our finance team and with our financial advisors, and so we're on the cusp, I would say, of being very close, but we're just a little bit short on the financing.
Sure,
that will come in time.
It's a big project.
It is, and
it takes a lot to operate it.
It does.
So,
Yep, it does for sure.
But those days will come.
It does, yeah.
And we at least have some options now, and down the road we'll have options available for.
Sure.
You hope you grow it big enough that you'll need a secondary gym to use on Saturday mornings if you need to.
Yeah, we hope so.
Let's back up just a little bit. We kind of got off on the parks thing, which is great because it's exciting and it's something that people really expect a city to provide, I think. We'll back up just a little bit now. Talk about when you started, when you mentioned that you pretty much started as a volunteer on the Parks Department, but you also winked and said, well, it wasn't really my first thing. I think I know what you're talking about. So let's talk about that audit. I'm sure that's what you're talking about.
It is.
And then Sam will move over and let you talk about when you started.
Sure.
And the early days, and kind of get us back up to where we are.
Well, yeah. So I worked as a state auditor for a little over 11 years.
Nobody likes an auditor, right?
Unfortunately, we're very misunderstood creatures, but nonetheless, I worked as a state auditor for a little over 11 years, and we had a statewide mission. We were there to conduct performance-based, basically, audits of governmental entities and make sure that we were following the rules and that we're being good stewards of tax money. And so I had the great fortune a long number of years ago, and before I lived here, of being asked to lead the petition audit for the city of Marshfield. I learned a lot through that audit. I learn new things every audit. So every audit that I do, I'm building on that toolbox of ideas that I can provide to other entities. And so when I got to Marshfield, the problems they were facing weren't unlike anything I'd seen.
But it was a petition audit. So the
was.
citizens petitioned to have this done.
Absolutely. The citizens asked us to be there.
Yeah.
So we listened to the citizens' concerns, and we built an audit plan, and then we executed procedures, which consisted of me working right here. I was in the police department in the courtroom for a number of months, and then I sat in what is now Monica Robinson's office for another number of months, working right alongside these individuals who were still working there at that time. Learning what they do and how they do it and how we could improve it.
Yeah.
We issued that report, and I did a follow-up about a year later, but that was pretty much my professional touch point. So my first touch point with really understanding where the city of Marshfield was at in a large number of ways was that audit. It also gave me the opportunity to know a little bit more about the city than I had before, and a lot more about the people. And that's why when Stephen and I were deciding before our kids started school where we really wanted to put down those roots and where we wanted them to be, Marshfield floated top of the list.
That's awesome. So let's kind of reflect on that. So you're called here to do a petition by the citizens because maybe at least some thought things weren't kosher in Marshfield at the time. But Marshfield still impressed you enough that you wanted to move here and live.
Absolutely.
Raise
my children here.
That says something. And obviously the petition probably turned out some things that need to be fixed and need to be looked at, but probably wasn't as bad as it could have been, I'm sure.
Oh, no.
Right.
No.
So again, if it would have been, you might not want to move here.
It could have been. But it was always a community that I felt had the opportunity to turn it around.
Right.
And it wasn't just that they had the opportunity, but I knew they were going to do it. And I followed the story for quite some time.
Now, in all fairness, this was probably also during the Great Recession, right?
This would have been just at the tail end.
Okay.
So I think I would have started the audit at the end of 2010.
Well, that's during the height of it.
2010, 2011.
Yeah, that's the height
Actually,
of it.
It was 2011
The
when I did the audit.
The crash occurred in 08.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
09, 10, 11, 12, things didn't start moving back up until about
really
13. Because
13.
I'm a state representative and we're dealing with state budget and money.
Yes.
And the reason I'm making that comment is because things were tight.
Sure.
Really
You didn't have any
tight.
money for anything.
No. Did not.
It was tough to even get the road potholes filled.
It was
Best I remember.
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the scope of the audit was 2010, which
Yeah,
was the tightest period.
So that, I mean, that's just in fairness, you know, when times are hard, that's when things,
Absolutely.
you know, sometimes surface. But anyway, well, Sam, what about you?
Well, I mean, just imagine fast forwarding after the audit and then find out that your auditor is going to come and serve on some committees, and then she puts her name in the hat for the mayor, right? You can imagine that panic, but no,
Yeah.
It was really good. But, you know, back in 99, so I graduated in 99. So right after high school, I basically started here and started in the parks department. And
You were working for me at Walmart.
I worked for you at
You
Walmart.
called me one day or called me back there and said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I really don't. I'm going to try to get on at the city. You know, I'd like to make a career of it." You told me that.
Yeah, so
you knew then that you wanted a local job in Marshfield, Missouri, that with long-term benefits.
Yeah,
and you knew that. And
so my dad had that at Webster, right?
Yeah,
And my biggest hero when I was little was my dad, and so, you know, my goal was always to have a career, something similar to that.
Right.
So, whenever I started, like I said, I was in the parks department, and that lasted 3 or 4 months, and had some just fantastic people, you know, besides my family. J.E. Jones was just just the legend himself, right? And so, you know, he'd been at the city for 44 years when he retired, and so whenever I came on board, he offered me a job coming to work for the water department. I said, "Well, Jay," I said, "honestly, don't even know what you guys do." And so I'll never forget it. He asked me, he said, "Do you want a full-time job?" Well, I was still in that spot where I didn't know if I was going to try to go to college or just stay here for sure. And so I was like, "Nah, I don't think so." But I said, "I'll work for you all summer until I decide."
Yeah.
At the end of the summer, I stayed. And so, you know, came along beside him, and, you know, James Vance had been here for 30 years, and Gene German had been here for a long time, and just came along all these guys out in the field. And it was fun, but I was the youngest one by 20 years, you know. So then whenever they started transitioning out, jobs opened up, and I started kind of working my way up the ladder.
Right.
You know, started working more directly with the administration team, and got really familiar with Dan McMillan, right? He's another one that came along beside me and really helped shape and mold me. And
good man.
Great guy, and can't thank him enough. And Karen Case, you know, she was inside City Hall, and just came on the backside of Glenda Lassiter, and Carol Smith was there, and of course Ken Clardy, right? Another legend of Marshfield. And so it was just great times. But as those guys started to transition out, we didn't have a big influx of people coming in. And so every time those positions would open up, I was never seeking that next step. You know what I'm saying? I remember sitting down with J.E., and I told J.E. one time, I was like, "I don't want your job. I want you to stay here another 40 years, and I'll retire under you, and we'll both retire."
Sure.
But it's been a good ride. And so been here 25 years, seen lots of changes. And like you said, through the recession portion, we were very reactionary. You didn't have any money to be proactive, and so didn't put anybody on. And so when people left through attrition, we just didn't fill those voids. And so we don't have very many more employees now than what we did before that, because we just learned to do more with less, just like every other community and business.
Well, we come out of the recession about 13, 14, 15, kind of climbed out of that. And then in 2020, we had something else happen, right?
We did.
Which is exactly when Natalie took over in office.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. I'm not sure quite ready to talk about that. So you were actually kind of promoted to assistant city administrator about when?
Oh gosh.
10 years ago?
Yeah, it's probably been 12,
yeah.
13, something like that.
Yeah. So you got that position, and but then, you know, you correct me if I'm wrong, but how many city administrators worked right ahead of you or right above you in pecking order? And I mean, in that period of time, there were several.
Yeah.
So you kind of ended up having to run things.
Yeah.
But really didn't have the title or getting paid for it.
Sure.
That's for you. I'm not blaming you, but
sure. Yeah, no,
you had quite a few, you know, things weren't first real steady like they are now or like they used to be.
Right. And of course, you know, go back talking about Dan. Dan had been here for 30 years, you know, which is unheard of for a city administrator. And so coming off the coattails of that, it would have been a hard step for anybody or hard shoes for anybody to fill. And so yeah, there was a transition period there where it wasn't fun and it wasn't great, and so the city brought some people in, and so obviously work just dug in next to them. There was some thought on my. I mean, obviously, I never thought that I was going to be sitting in a city administrator position, but there was some questions asked, and at the time I just wasn't fully committed to doing that just because
Right.
of the commitment itself. I said, hey, love to come on and help and do this and that, but my kids were so little, and the time commitment
Right.
is 3 or 4 nights a week you're down there at
Yeah.
meetings and whatever, and so you fast forward and my kids got a little bit older, and then we got through some that transition period, and of course I got a little more tenured inside the office. There's a big difference between all city operations inside the office and everything outside.
That's right.
And so I tell people all the time I couldn't do what I do in another community because I don't know everything out in the field that I know from here. And so yeah, it's been good,
Yeah.
but it's been a big learning curve for sure.
Sure. Okay, so we're into the the late 2010 decade now, and monies were flowing. You get elected. Did you get elected in April of 20?
June,
June
because
of
they postponed the election.
June of 20. So COVID hit in February, March. Okay. So let's
Yes.
go there. Tell me about that. Tell me about you getting elected, getting sworn in, and then going, okay, now what are we going to do with this masks mandate and all this crap?
Yeah, it was an interesting time. So I filed for election December 18th
hmm
of
Before COVID.
2019, right? When COVID wasn't a word that I knew or had any comprehension of what was coming, right? And so fast forward, I had stayed in pretty tight communications with the current elected officials and the city leaders, just so that I could learn as much as I could and be as prepared as possible when I
Right.
walked in the door. But forward to the middle of March, when suddenly we're shutting down, that was that was a gut check period,
Yeah.
right? At that point, I was the only person who'd filed for office. So the fact that I was going to be the mayor was evident. The question was when and how on earth was I going to approach that?
Now, did you come in the same time JC and Quinn came in?
No, JC, Quinn, and Robbie all
Uh-huh.
came in 2021.
Okay, so
they
they
were
weren't
about
there
a year
yet.
after
Okay.
me. Mhm.
Okay.
And so all of the shutdown ordinances and all of that took place under Robert Williams in March.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the election was postponed to
Yeah.
June.
Right.
And then I was sworn in June. And at June, I was still trying to figure out, where do I get the information? How do I rely on the people who've been in the thick of this the longest?
Right.
And how do I use that information to do the best I can in this position? And so leaned on Mike Taylor quite a bit, on Robert to understand what had been done,
Sure.
on city staff to understand why we would do what we would
Sure.
do, the health board. Extensively, they let me listen in on all of their meetings so that I'd have a better understanding of what they were saying.
Right.
And it was really just trying to get all the information together
Yeah.
and provide that to our board meetings, so that the people who have the decision making power, which is not the mayor, it's
That's right.
the board.
Council, that's right.
And so trying to make sure they had all the information
Right.
from the right sources.
Right.
That was my goal, and that was my approach to this. We did have several instances where mask mandates were brought up.
Oh yeah.
At the what felt like the one that was going to be pushed the hardest. We put together a very large public hearing where everybody could come in and give their opinions.
Yeah.
Then they decided to table the motion.
Right.
More or less.
Quite a bit of pushback.
It was. It was.
And social media especially. But in all fairness, I mean, nobody, even from the federal administration, from the Trump administration on down. I was working in the Department of Health. It's Jeff City at the time. There was so many unknowns. I mean,
Absolutely.
it was like just unbelievable. And the one thing that I appreciate Governor Parson doing, at least in Missouri, was leaving it up to the local communities.
Absolutely.
There was not mandates from the state level, which was the right thing to do, because some communities absolutely, well, first of all, it should be local. We should start with our direction
Always.
at local level. And so there was certainly there's just so much propaganda out there. And so it was a really difficult time. And everybody, I think now at least, should recognize that there was mistakes made from the federal level all the way down. But on the other hand, everybody did the best they could do at the time.
Yeah.
That's
and,
right.
And we could sit here and there'd be people out here in our audience that would argue that we should have had mandates, or some that
Right.
said we shouldn't have mandates, whatever. But and then we're not going to get into that. But it was a hard time, and for you to, I'd kind of forgotten that you began
So
your
that was my first
mayoral
taste.
term. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
So really the first year was solely focused on COVID.
Yeah.
And my mission through that entire thing was to get the data
Right.
from the right sources to the right people and
Right.
let them make
Right.
those decisions.
Yeah. Well,
Let them do their jobs.
I think, from my perspective, the city in Marshfield did a good job. And I think at one point in time there was some kind of a mandate that did
There
finally
was.
come out, but nobody paid attention to it. So and obviously you didn't throw anybody in jail for it. So,
No,
but
no,
and I know that you didn't. That wasn't your vote. I mean, you didn't vote on it.
I did not.
So anyway, okay, enough of that. So let's talk about your council. Let's mention your council to me, and because I know
Awesome.
You've got a great council that I think you all seem to be very cohesive. You don't see a lot of bickering and fighting like we've seen in the past. Talk about that for a minute.
Well, absolutely. Doing this job, it has only been as awesome as it has been because of the team around you, right?
That's
and
right.
and so it's all the employees, but it's also those 4 other elected positions.
Right.
And so Stacy Lee has the longest tenure. Of course, she's a kindergarten teacher, but really has a strong connection to the community, both its history and its future, because she's teaching its future every day. So I love it, having her on the team, and the vital information she brings to the team. JC Cunningham came on in 2021. And he has been a great team member as well. Very, very dedicated to taking care of the citizens concerned. Always bringing things to the table to consider and discuss, looking for that next bit of
Right.
information. And then we have Robbie Boggs. I'm kind of going through where they sit.
Yeah,
in my
yeah,
head. So Robbie Boggs also came in in 2021. He has a really unique background. He's great with numbers. He's a developer. He's a businessman, an entrepreneur. He's worked in many different fields, and his wife, being our public administrator for the county, gives him yet another layer of information where he's seeing maybe some of the most needed, most need,
Good
right?
perspective, yeah.
And then we have John Quinn. John Quinn has served our community in many different ways. He's also a member of the park board, or not park board, excuse me, the health board. Has been for quite some time. He also has had a business, a counseling center here in town. And so again, he has that unique perspective. He's a veteran. And he's continually bringing us again ideas that probably wouldn't surfaced in any other area. So we're a diverse background team, and I think that's what makes us work together really well. When they all came on, I told Sam I had one thing that I wanted to do. The one thing that doesn't happen in municipal government is there is no handbook on how to be an alderman, right? Or how to be a mayor. There's no training that you go to and sit down and they tell you what you have to do. That doesn't exist. You just jump in and you figure it out.
Right.
So the first thing I wanted to do, since none of them had a background in government operations or city operations, or had even really worked with the city a whole lot, I wanted to go through training. And so all of them came to countless extra meetings at the first part of their term. And our leadership came in too, and we took them to the sewer treatment plant, and we walked through every piece of it. What is it and what does it do? We took them to parks, we took them to water towers, we took them to roads, and just said, this is why this looks like this, and what it takes to build from here. I think that has also helped us be a better informed and more cohesive team, because we started with a foundation of all learning together.
Right. Yeah.
And then we've just it's been a fantastic experience.
It appears like it is. And the employees, how many employees do you have? Roughly.
We just added some, so about 42.
42 employees.
Like
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot to keep your arms around.
Sure.
and all of the personnel issues you have to deal with, and the HR stuff, and the insurance and pensions. I mean, there's just a lot to deal with there. It's one of the larger businesses in Marshfield, obviously. But I was thinking there as you were talking about, people have heard me say this before, and I'm a strong believer that culture trumps strategy. Culture trumps strategy,
Yeah.
and the culture that you have in a community, carrying that on and people understanding that is extremely important. And it's not always, you know, well, the time I spent in Jeff City, I learned an awful lot about a lot of different things that I'd never been exposed to. And one of them was like the Missouri Municipal League.
Mhm.
It's a very liberal organization. Sorry, that's how I feel about it.
It is.
They're always pushing and projecting the most progressive issues, and a lot of it's mandates that come from the federal government or whatever. The climate we live in today. But what you've been able to do, and I think under Sam's leadership as the administrator, you've been able to maintain the culture that we understand here in Marshfield
Absolutely.
without pushing the agenda of the municipal league, which is to be extremely progressive in most cases. You learn from them, you learn what you need to learn from them, and you utilize what you can from them. But not everything that they recommend or suggest, and you don't have to do anything. They're an organization that's not, it's not mandated that a city has to be a member, but I think it's helpful. You
Sure.
need that.
Absolutely
You
is.
need the information that they share with you, but that doesn't mean you implement everything.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you guys have done a good job with that. You've been able to maintain our culture and realize that, we don't want to be a progressive East or West Coast city.
Sure.
We're the Midwest. We're the Bible Belt. We're Marshfield.
Sure.
And
It's got to fit.
to
right?
me, that's important.
Yeah.
This was the editorial portion of my program, which I'm entitled to do. And but I do want to give you credit for that because it's not easy. You got stuff thrown at you all the time, and people out here, probably the biggest complaints you get are some of the progressive stuff, the stupid stuff that's mandated that you have to do, right?
Sure.
But you've been able to balance that, so I just want to mention that.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it, but it definitely is a team effort, right?
Sure.
It means
Yeah.
everybody has to be on board with keeping that as a priority.
Sure.
And I really feel like it is.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, so 42 employees. You're obviously you got to have a place to put these people. I mean, you're growing. Your parks department's grown. So you made a recent purchase.
We have,
Uh-huh.
Trying to work on the city hall thing has been a question of
Yeah.
mine since I
Yeah,
started here.
explain why you did what you did.
Okay. So with the prior board and when I first came in as mayor, I'd even put together kind of a slideshow so that they could better understand how we have overused our space currently in City Hall. We
And it was
currently
built in the early 70s.
It was.
Same size.
Yep.
Okay.
Same
it was, and it served us for a great number of years in wonderful ways. But we have now gotten to the point where we have 3 and sometimes 4 people in one office. We're having to utilize the space in the council chambers for both office space or plan development, but then clear everything out every time there's a meeting, and it's just it's not efficient. That's what it is. It's just not an efficient way to operate. And so, my background, I'm always looking at how do we improve this? How do we make it better? And the truth was, we needed space. The prior board had purchased a structure on the downtown square, and their dream was to move into it for City Hall, and they had great plans for it. They had some preliminary numbers on what that was going to cost, but it didn't seem to fit with the citizens. That seemed to be the largest piece of it. And so as we continued that discussion and as the board members changed, we've continually talked about how do we solve our problem for now and in the future, and yet make sure we're being the best with the taxpayer's dollar and we're providing that efficiency. So our first plan was, hey, let's just remodel the current City Hall. Let's expand that footprint. make some changes so that we get a better flow and move things that we needed to move. So we made the decision to sell the structure on the square and put that money back. That money is still sitting there. Until we used a chunk of it to buy a new building, but that money was sitting back to be used later, and we went full into how do we remodel this and make it more functional and usable. And truly, we felt with what in my opinion is a relatively small number of square feet we needed to add to the structure.
Mhm.
I really thought it would just be almost a slam dunk. However, as we continued through the process and we got quote and comparative quote, and we had construction companies come in and walk through the structure looking for value engineering, as we call it, we never could get the number down to something that we felt we could pay for with the cash that we had saved, and that was important. And so we stuck that plan back and started looking again. We pivoted. About that time, we realized that the building on a highway was available, and so that's where conversation started again. And we're very happy to have that structure now within our unit. It's very close, obviously, to the current city hall, and it's going to allow us to kind of do a combo project, if you will. So we'll move everybody into the new structure at first so that we can remodel the current city hall, but we won't be looking at expanding its footprint. We're just going to make it more usable. Once that's done, then the people who are supposed to come back will come back, and that structure will end up being Parks Department, and then a meeting room, basically, for all the different meetings that happen, including council. So I think there'll be a lot more to come with that structure as it evolves, but those things will allow us to really develop that efficiency and our effectiveness. And I think the taxpayers will see that in the end, because our level of service will be able to change when we're operating better.
And I can tell you that, your square foot price to do this will be potentially half what it would have been or maybe even less.
Maybe even more.
To remodel City Hall or expand City Hall. I mean, I think that's the thing that people will hopefully over time will understand is the dollars that it would have taken to remodel the old building downtown, which was built, pre-asbestos days. It was built pre-energy efficient days. No parking, very limited parking. I mean, all the negatives. Elevator, that's $100,000 minimum. But all those things that would have had to have been done there, and when it takes your square foot price just astronomical. And now you've got a building with slap a little paint on it, clean it up a little bit, and you got a building that square foot price is much less, more efficient. And you got about 3 acres there, I think.
And it leaves us just a little bit of room to grow. Not a ton, but it leaves us a little bit of room to grow. And we're just outgrowing everything we've got now.
Be efficient because it's basically almost across the street. So. Well, that's good. It's good that you guys are being efficient with their money, and of course, we expect that from an auditor, right? a numbers gal.
So. I can guarantee you it's something I pay close attention to.
And that's going to be hard to believe. But we got 3 minutes left.
Oh,
I told you it goes by fast.
You did.
It really does. But finish up by talking a little bit about other future endeavors for the city, or where do you see long range? Where do you see us in 25 years? Obviously, we haven't even talked about the new overpass and the sewer project out there, but how's that sewer project coming? I know you've been kind of wanting to get that rolling so we can see some progress.
Everything takes more time than I think I want it to. However, it is rolling along at the speed that it should. So once the state was able to provide us the money, we immediately had our engineers drawing up the plans, and they have already executed what they need to for the bore. So the first stage that has to happen is we got to get back under I-44 again. Right. So
hopefully that goes a little better than the water did. Everybody knows the water didn't go so well, but sometimes engineers could engineer a little better too.
So
the crew's mobilized this week actually to start that, and so they've got 180 days to get underneath there this time. And
good.
So it's moving right along. And so on the tail end of that, that's the first portion that has to be done. And so by the time they get done with that, we'll have everything else bid out and ready to take off from both ends.
Sure. And so the ultimate, number one, no tax increase.
Correct.
That's number one. And even the overpass project didn't, correct if I'm wrong, it didn't increase, it extended a tax that was out there.
It was, well, the old one sunset, and then
Yes.
Yeah,
we
but you
went
didn't
in
raise the
perpetuity.
current tax
No.
rate.
No,
That's important to people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
it definitely was paid through taxes, but whatever rate we were paying, it just continued it another
Correct.
15 years or whatever it is. So all of that is being done without any immediate increase over
Right.
what we're paying now.
Sure.
Thanks to the state and the funding that was able to be got from the state. But so along with that, what other long range plans and goals do you see? Obviously, you see growth out there. You see probably some commercial growth, some housing growth. New church is getting ready to be built out there. I know.
Yep.
What else do you see for the city and future expansion and even growth? I mean, do you think we're going to see our population go from 8,000 to 10,000 in 10 years?
I do. And it may even come sooner than that. And so there are a lot of compliance regulations that come in with a population of 10,000 or more. And we've already started work on
Really?
preparing for that.
That's the magic number.
10,000 is a number. Yeah.
You start
Wow.
getting into what they call an MS4 permit, and so you start getting
Really?
into a whole different ball of
Absolutely.
works.
So we're already doing what we need to lay the groundwork to be there.
Okay. But
Because
you got to have housing. If you're going to have 10,000 people,
Absolutely.
they got to live somewhere.
That's right.
So
Yeah. So
talk about that.
yeah. So just recently, we were able to partner with Flint Rock Builders and Eden Built LLC, and so that's been a big thing for the city, right? I mean, one of the things that we've lacked for growth has been the housing, and so while the city doesn't necessarily see a bunch of dollars off of rooftops, it's the people that live in there and that spend tax dollars here and the workforce that comes with it. So, they're going to produce between 50 and 60 lots up there, and so
That's just the first phase.
that's just the first phase of that one, and then there's plans to expand in other parts of the town without getting into too much detail, but with the hope, with a couple other places, that there'll be 200 lots provided.
Yeah.
And so that'll be huge, not only for the growth of people moving in here, but we've got a lot of local builders that's what they do for a living.
That's right.
And right now they're traveling outside of the city to build houses because there's nothing here. What we've seen is a bunch of infill. We've seen these bigger lots in town, part of the older parts of town, that they're busting lots up. So
I
they
see
can
that.
infill.
Yeah.
And
Which
which
is
is
good.
which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's
It is
great.
a good thing because without this, then
Cleaning up some old crappy houses or lots.
yeah. And so what you see is people coming in and tearing some of those down and putting them back, and it's been a good addition in some places. But at some point, that's going to dry up, and everything's going to be used up.
Yeah.
So these housing developments are just going to be huge, and being able to be flexible on our planning and zoning side, coming along beside people and beside our builders, and with inflation and unit prices as high as they are, being sensitive to that, and people coming in and saying, hey, everything works in here except for this. And so what I've always challenged our builders with is said, hey, you put your numbers together and let me know what doesn't work. And so when we figure that out, if there's any way for us to partner with them on anything, even looking at our zoning codes, what can we do to help you grow? Right? What can we? Because if we're not growing, if we're just sitting still, we're moving backwards. Right? There's really no stagnant area.
That's
You're
right.
Moving forward.
That's
moving
right.
backwards in a city. So
I think that last paragraph you talked about there has been extremely important that most people don't realize. The flexibility of working with people.
Sure.
And not being so rigid on some plan that somebody drew 25 years ago.
Sure.
Because times change.
They do.
And you have to be flexible with that. And that includes planning and zoning. And that includes everybody has a different perspective on things. But without rehashing open and old wounds, but I mean, there's examples of a period of time when, the map doesn't say that you can put that there.
Yeah.
No, can't do that. Well, who says? Well, that's what the map, it was adopted. Well, we're in a different era now,
We are.
And if you look at America was built on neighborhoods.
Mhm.
I don't care what town you lived in.
Yeah.
Neighborhoods. And you had a neighborhood market, and you had a neighborhood service station, and you had a neighborhood strip with insurance offices and barber shops or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
It's done right. That
Sure.
doesn't mean you stick it, in the middle of Briarwood.
Right.
But out on the edge of Briarwood or on the old highway or wherever at an intersection, there's nothing wrong with having a neighborhood market.
And it
I mean,
and it has to make sense, right?
it has to make sense.
And that's where we're at, and,
Yeah.
and that flexibility's been good, and it's been fun to watch.
Yeah.
And so, you know, anybody ever seen our code book, you know, it's about that thick,
Yeah.
right? And I'm bound to stick with what's inside that code book.
Yeah, I know you are.
But I'm also charged with trying to get the city to grow. And so what's been fun is coming along beside these builders and these developers and saying, well, what in here doesn't work?
Right.
Yeah.
And then taking that back to my respected boards and saying, hey, planning zoning, this is what we're hearing, this is what they're saying.
Sure.
And then taking back to the board, and they're the only ones that can amend that code.
Right.
But they've been very sensitive and very, very good to work
They
with
have.
people and say, hey, let's make this work.
Yeah.
Right. As long as it makes sense, and as long as it's good growth. Not all growth is good growth, but as long as it's good growth, let's make it. Let's make
It
it
fits
happen.
the culture.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, the culture of Marshfield Greenhouse being on Maple Street for 80 years, and then a few years ago when they wanted to sell it, there was a struggle,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
Because it wasn't zoned right.
Sure.
You guys worked through it and got
Sure.
it taken care of for them.
Mhm.
But I knew a little bit about that. And there's been other examples.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to you for that. And part of the reason for that is because you do have local people now in planning and zoning. You have Rick, you have Steve.
Sure.
You understand the town.
Sure.
You don't have to call St. Louis
Sure.
to get a zoning question answered,
Sure.
which I've experienced in the past.
Sure.
So anyway, I appreciate that, and
Yeah.
it's important. Well, producer Logan Dean Fraker is back. So I guess that means it's time to wrap up. Any final thoughts, Mayor? Parting words?
I just want to thank everybody for letting me serve in the seat. It's been a great run so far, and I look forward to the future.
We appreciate you. We do. You're doing a great job. And so is Sam. And Sam is approachable, and we as citizens appreciate that. May not always agree,
That's
but you know what? We can get an answer, and he's approachable, and he's one of us, and so are you. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you
Have
very
a good summer.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. See y'all hopefully next week, unless I do something for our anniversary. I got to check with Melanie, but it's coming up like next weekend, so I might not see you next week, but I'll let you know. Thank you for watching, and